And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen. I've made a very big mistake, guys. I don't even know where the mistakes began. I've destroyed my once happy marriage because of my lustful desires. I don't even know how I got here. Everything was at the verge of being lost. Everything happened so fast, and I'm so ashamed of myself right now. I've done something so despicable. I can't even look myself in the mirror right now, and I don't think I will ever be able to forgive myself for having an affair with my husband's friend. I blame myself for everything. I got so carried away by my lust that I couldn't even control myself. What should I do now? I'm so confused and lost. Hi guys, my name is Anita, and I'm a 30-year-old fashion designer. I have been a fashion designer since I was 16 years old, but not professionally though. I learned the basics of fashion designing from my mom. She was also a fashion designer. I have been a professional fashion designer for 10 years now. I'm married to a medical doctor. His name is Derek, and he is 32 years old. We live in Rochester, New York, USA. Derek and I have been married for 5 years now. Derek is one of the best things that has happened to me. He is my soulmate and the absolute love of my life. Derek and I met in college, and ever since then, we have been inseparable. Everyone thinks I married Derek because of his money, but that's not true. I won't blame them for thinking that way because physically Derek is not handsome and is below average height, but all these things don't matter to me. The quality that attracted me to Derek is his caring nature. I can boldly say without mincing any words that Derek loves me more than he loves himself, and he provides everything I ask of him and even more. He can go to any length to see me happy. Our relationship started having some challenges ever since Derek was transferred to a neighboring town 6 months ago. He asked if we could relocate together, but I told him it was not possible. I used my fashion designing business as an excuse, but that was not the reason. Derek volunteered to work for an NGO, and he was sent to a remote town for 2 years. I couldn't imagine going to start life all over again in another place, and it was a remote town. So I told him I would have loved to go but couldn't because of my business. He understood my reasons, but I could tell he was disappointed from the look on his face. He promised to be visiting once every month, and he asked if that's okay by me, and I said yes. I didn't know being away from each other would cause a huge gap in our marriage. The distance became an issue, and even communication became hard because Derek was always busy. But he still made time for us to communicate once in a while. Derek made sure we communicated at least 3 times daily, and we did video calls daily. Derek made sure he kept his promises by visiting at least once every month. I started getting bored of everything over time, even though Derek was my best friend and we did practically everything together. It was just hard for me to cope by myself. I was lonely and needed someone by my side. One day, on my way home from the grocery store, a car suddenly came to a stop and the person in the car approached me where I was standing. His face looked familiar, but I could not place where I had met him before. He introduced himself as Nathan, Derek's friend, and I immediately remembered him. He was one of Derek's groomsmen at our wedding. He asked about Derek, and I told him Derek had been away for his NGO work for about 6 months. He offered to drop me at home because my car was faulty and was with the mechanic. I was reluctant at first, but he insisted, so I obliged. The ride home was so fun that I didn't even know when we arrived at my gate. He offered to help me carry my groceries inside, and I accepted. He came in and even helped me arrange my groceries. I offered him a cup of coffee and we continued gisting. Nathan is handsome and he is very fun to be with. He is 6 feet tall and he can pass for a model. He wanted to go, but I begged him to stay a little since there was still time. We decided to have a glass of wine and watch a movie together. That was all I can remember, guys. Nothing prepared me for what happened next. The next morning, I woke up to see Nathan on my matrimonial bed. You guys are shocked, right? So was I. I can't even remember anything that happened, but one thing was certain. I had slept with my husband's friend, and I didn't even know how it happened. I was devastated, but Nathan behaved as if nothing had happened. I was panicking while he was calm. He told me to relax and that it was normal, and I wouldn't be the first person to sleep with my husband's friend. He categorically told me he didn't take advantage of me and that I consented to everything that happened. Well, I was too drunk to remember anything that happened, but he offered to make breakfast for me. I asked him to leave immediately, but he refused. He insisted on making breakfast for me. I was still hungover from the previous night, so there was not much I could do. I didn't know what to do. I felt bad. I'm not proud of what I did. Derek didn't deserve it. I don't even know what came over me all of a sudden. How could I let myself stoop so low to have an affair with my husband's friend? I asked myself that a lot because I didn't think Derek would ever forgive me for what I did. What he feared the most had happened. Derek has trust issues because of his past relationships. He always told me ladies come around him because of his money and end up cheating on him. I assured him that I'm different and that I would never do that to him. Initially, Derek doubted my love for him. He couldn't understand why I was him if not for his money, but slowly I gained his trust. I made him understand that there's more to a person than just looks, and I made see himself in another light. I can't believe I have broken that trust. How do I convince Derek that I got carried away? I know he would think I'm just like the rest of his exes. I was so scared because I knew how wrong I'd been. I was still thinking of what to do when Nathan walked in with a food tray in his hand. I was furious, but I couldn't bring myself to ask him to leave. He offered me breakfast, and I ate. He consoled me and told me everything would be fine. I feel so bad right now because even though I could have stopped, I kept making the wrong choices. My affair with Nathan continued and knew what I was doing was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. Nathan and I became so close that he moved in with me. Derek could no longer visit once in a month like he used to because he became very busy with work, but he made sure we still communicate every day. Whenever he called, Nathan would excuse me so I would be comfortable talking to Derek. It felt weird at first, but with time, I got used to it. One day, I got a call from Derek. He told me he had a surprise for me. I thought he had sent a package for me as usual, but I was wrong. He asked me to open the door, and I hurriedly ran towards the door, but nothing prepared me for the shock I experienced when I opened the door and saw Derek. I froze for seconds, and he had to tap me to bring me back to reality. He could tell I wasn't thrilled to see him. He asked why I wasn't happy seeing him, and I knew I would get caught if I didn't act fast, so I had to come up with something. I wanted to lie about being sick, but I remembered Derek was a medical doctor and I couldn't get away with it. So I had to come up with something else. I lied to him that I was having menstrual cramps. He knew how bad my cramps were. So he asked me to take a rest and just relax. Everything was going well, and I was so lost enjoying the pampering I was getting from Derek that I didn't have time to think about the mess I was in. Nothing prepared me for what happened next. Derek went upstairs to change his clothes and stumbled on Nathan's things in his closet. From clothes to singlets and boxers. He was furious, and I could hear it from the way he spoke to me. At that moment, I wanted the ground to open so I could just disappear. I knew that could be the end for me. I wanted to confess, but I knew that Derek would not forgive me if I confessed to him that I was having an affair with his friend. I didn't confess to Derek, and I didn't get caught. I lied to Derek when he asked me about the things he saw in his closet. I told him those things belonged to my brother. I told him my brother was in town for work. He asked why I never mentioned it to him, considering the fact that we spoke every day, but I told him it must have skipped my mind. He asked why my brother's things were in his closet, and at that moment, I knew he was not buying my lies and he wasn't going to back down. I told him my brother had been busy with work, so I was just helping him to do his laundry. From the look he had on his face, I could tell he didn't believe every single thing I was told. I even had tears on my face and accused him of not trusting me. I'm so ashamed of myself, and I can't believe I stopped that low. He wiped my tears and apologized to me. He never mentioned anything about that matter again. I quickly ran out and called Nathan not to come back that Derek was back. I was thankful that Nathan was not at home when Derek returned. I thought it was the universe working in my favor. All through the time Derek was around, I was pretending to be happy, but the truth was that I was dying with guilt. Seeing Derek reminded me why I got married to him and why I rejected a lot of proposals just to be with him. I think it was at that point I knew the gravity of what I had done. Here is a man that can do absolutely anything for me, a man that went against his family just to be with me, a man that made sure he provided everything I ever asked of. He was the man that stood by me when everyone called me a gold digger, the very man that changed my life. How did I even bring myself to have an affair with his friend? I was so disconnected from everything. I'm just very tired. Update. Derek noticed I was not myself and asked me countless times what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. I was scared of what the outcome would be. I felt bad for betraying him. It wasn't a conscious decision, but how do I explain to him that it was loneliness that pushed me into the arms of his friend? Don't get me wrong, guys. I take 100% accountability for everything that happened, but I wouldn't have slept with Nathan if Derek hadn't been transferred. I could tell Derek was beginning to suspect me when I saw him snooping on our CCTV camera, but thank goodness I was smart enough to deactivate it anytime Nathan was around. Derek monitored every one of my steps, and he went as far as checking my phone, but I had deleted all my call logs and messages, which even raised his suspicion. I guess he was only looking for evidence before he could say something. He became more agitated when my brother never returned. You guys remember I lied to him about my brother being in town, right? I had to cover up with another lie. I told him my brother was called for work urgently in another town. Before Derek went back, he told me he would be resigning and he is planning on opening his own clinic so he would stop traveling and we could start a family. Derek and I had always wanted kids, but because of the nature of his volunteer job with the NGO, we couldn't have kids because he was always not around. We decided we would have kids when he was more stable, because he always told me he wanted to be part of our kids' lives. It was mixed feelings for me. On one hand, I was happy we could finally have kids. On the other side, I was sad about my affair with Nathan. Would Derek still have kids with me when he finds out I slept with his friend? I know he wouldn't. I know the man I married has an unforgiving spirit. He never forgave any of his ex-girlfriends that cheated on him. What more about me, his own wife? I knew how hard it was for Derek to finally be able to trust me, and it took a lot of work to get here. I can't believe I messed up everything. Derek went back to officially resign, and I decided to finally end things with Nathan. I decided to meet with Nathan outside my house, but I remembered some of his things were still in my house, so I called him over to break up with him officially. I told him it was over and that I couldn't continue seeing him. He demanded to know the reason for the sudden change of attitude, but I told him it was not his business and that he should get his things and get out. Nathan started packing his things when he saw my mind was made up, and he told me I would regret my actions one day and come back begging. I told him that day would never come. While we were having the back and forth, my phone rang and grabbed it to see who was calling. When I checked, Derek was the one calling. My heart literally jumped out of my chest. I signaled Nathan to excuse me, and he did. I picked the call, and Derek said he was only calling to check up on me and to tell me he had resigned. I was happy, and we continued talking. For a second, I forgot Nathan was still around. While I was still on the phone speaking with Derek, Nathan walked in and informed me with a very loud and angry voice that he had packed up his belongings and he was living. At that moment, I literally died. I guess he thought I was done with the phone call, because Derek and I don't usually speak for long because he is always busy with work. I was praying and hoping that Derek didn't hear what Nathan said, but unfortunately, my hope was dashed when Derek asked what Nathan was doing in our house. How could he identify the voice? I thought they were just casual friends. I forgot to tell you guys one thing about Derek. He never forgets a face or voice. That's one of his traits. I was trying to comprehend everything when he asked me for the second time what Nathan was doing in our home. I was too stunned to speak. I never knew I would get caught, at least not like that, and not when I just ended things with Nathan. I couldn't come up with a lie any longer, and my brain was blank. He told me he knew I was lying when I told him the clothes in his closet belonged to my brother, and that he even got more suspicious when he discovered that I disabled the CCTV camera. He said he knew I was cheating, but what he didn't know was that I was cheating with his friend. At that moment, I couldn't control my tears any longer. He asked me to leave his house before he got back. I couldn't believe what was happening to me, and it felt like my whole world had been shattered. I couldn't bring myself to leave Derek's house. I mean, where would I have gone from there? I knew there was no way I could go back to my parents' house. What would I tell them happened in the first place? I decided to forget all the consequences and wait for Derek. I thought he might forgive me when he found out it was loneliness that pushed me to cheat on him with his friend. But I was wrong. Derek was very furious when he arrived. I have never seen it that way before. He was even more furious when he saw me. He asked me what I was still doing in the house and threatened to call the police and tell them I was trespassing. All my pleading went on deaf ears. He asked me to take everything I came with to his house 5 years ago, and that I shouldn't take anything he bought for me, be it slippers or even hairpins. I went on my knees and started pleading. I begged him to forgive me and give us a second chance, but he was adamant about me leaving, and he didn't listen to everything I said. He promised to make life difficult for me. I tried everything I could, but Derek refused to listen. Worst of all was that I couldn't even call anyone to beg on my behalf because I would have to explain everything to them. I knew no one would understand my plight, not even my friends. They always told me how lucky I was to be married to such a loving, kind, and generous man. Derek made sure I lacked nothing all through our marriage. Money was never my problem. When I saw how adamant Derek was, I picked a few of my things and left, not knowing that was the last time I would step foot in our matrimonial home. I went to crash at my fashion store while I was hoping to squash things out with Derek the following day. I closed down the store temporarily and sent my workers away. I'm still trying to get my thoughts together and find out what to do. I need my husband back in my life. Update: it is still a mystery to me how my life changed in a twinkle of an eye. I mean, how did I go from living in a luxurious mansion to now squatting in my store? Everything happened so fast it didn't make sense. It all felt like a dream, and I wanted to wake up from the nightmare so bad. After days of sleeping at my fashion store, I cried a lot when I realized what my life had become. I got so caught up in my thoughts that I didn't even know when I slept off the next day. I was woken up by the sound of my phone ringing, and it was our lawyer calling. He said he wanted to see me, and I asked him to come to the store. I got the biggest shock of my life when our lawyer arrived with divorce papers. I couldn't believe my eyes. He asked me to sign the divorce papers, but I refused. I tried calling Derek, but I discovered he had blocked my line from reaching him. I decided to go see him at the house, but while I was preparing to go, some group of people arrived at the store, and the lawyer introduced them to me as the new owners of the store. I was flabbergasted, and it took all the little strength left in me for me to keep standing. Apparently, Derek sold my store and gave the proceeds to charity. I couldn't believe my ears, guys. Why would Derek do this to me? I never believed he was capable of such a dubious thing. I know he was the one that opened the store for me with his money after we got married, but I was the one that worked hard to make it what it is now. How can he just throw away my hard work? His name was on the ownership documents, but I never imagined us getting divorced. The new owners of my store gave me 24 hours to vacate the store. I was grateful because 24 hours was more than enough for me, because I thought I could make Derek forgive me and change his mind. I left the store for Derek's place, but I got another shock of my life again. Derek had sold our house and I was not allowed in. It was at that point I knew I had lost everything. I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself anymore, because I knew Derek had made up his mind to frustrate me. I tried calling him several times, but it never went through. I signed the divorce papers and decided to move on with my life. I left the store and decided to move to a hotel. I got another shock when my card was declined. Apparently, Derek has striked again. This time, he wiped everything from our joint account because we operated a joint account together. I was the one that suggested the idea because Derek earned more and it made me have access to his money and could go shopping anytime I wanted. I faced the biggest embarrassment of my life that day, and the hotel receptionist wanted to make a scene. I had to leave before things escalated. Here I am, guys, homeless, divorced, and penniless. I can only get the alimony when the divorce is finalized. It dawned on me at that moment that my life was over. I used my hands to ruin my life. With all hope being lost and me not having anywhere to go, I decided to contact Nathan. At first, he refused to pick up my call, but picked it up when I continued calling. I asked if we could meet so we could talk, but he told me he was busy and didn't have time. I told him everything that had happened to me and that I was homeless and needed a place to stay urgently. He told me he wasn't in town, I asked if I could go to his house, and he said that his girlfriend was around. That was another huge shocker for me. He told me he has a girlfriend now and that I should move on with my life. He told me he was only having fun with me and that it was nothing serious. Nathan went on to tell me how he once met Derek at a bar, and they were gossiping about women and how they cheated. According to him, Derek had been singing my praises, that he knows I can never cheat on him, and that he trusts me with his life. So, he decided to experiment and see if what Derek was saying was true, and unfortunately, I fell easily for his tricks. Guys, listening to Nathan made me realize how loose I was. I felt dirty at that instant and asked myself how I allowed myself to fall for his cheap tricks. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't forgive myself for the mistake I made. I was so mad at myself that I fell into depression. Nothing made sense to me again. I couldn't even reach Derek so I could apologize for breaking his trust and causing him pain. I decided to pick up what was left of my life. I went back to my parents' house in Chicago, where I joined my mom in her store. The news of my infidelity soon spread like wildfire across the town. Life never made sense to me again. Can you guys imagine that a few months ago, I was living like a queen in a big palace, and now I'm back in a small town where I have to depend on my parents for everything? I couldn't even afford to buy myself things as little as underwear. My life became a horror movie from the day I had an affair with my husband's friend. The lust was never worth it, and it would never be worth what I lost. I regret everything, but it's too late now, and I know it. I wish I never went out shopping for groceries on that fateful day. I wish I never met Nathan or even fell for his tricks. That was how I ruined my marriage and life. That's my story, guys. I hope we all learn to be faithful to our partners, and most importantly, we should never bite the hand that feeds us. I guess everyone knows this except me. Thanks and goodbye.